The cold wind blew over the dry hills of the alien planet. Private Daniel Reed pulled his jacket tighter, shivering slightly. He was just a human soldier, sent to guard a crashed alien pod until backup arrived. No one told him what was inside. The pod, no one cared to explain why it fell from orbit in the first place. It had been quiet for hours, nothing moved. He leaned against a rock and looked up at the twin moons. Then, without warning, the pod made a loud hissing sound. Daniel jumped and aimed his small plasma gun at it. The door slowly opened, steam pouring out like smoke from a monster's mouth. A shadow stepped out, tall and strange. It was a woman, or at least looked like one. She was covered in broken silver armor. Glowing blue from the cracks, her helmet slid back, revealing a face that was both beautiful and fierce. Long purple hair fell around her shoulders, and two small horns curved from her forehead. Her eyes glowed softly, sharp and alert, in her hand. She held a glowing blade, aimed directly at him. "Identify yourself," she said coldly, her voice full of command. Daniel raised both hands, trying not to look afraid. "I'm Private Reed, Human Security," he said. "I was told to guard this pod until recovery, that's all." She tilted her head, scanning him like a threat. Then she frowned, looked around, and lowered her weapon. Of course they'd send a human, she muttered under her breath. Her knees buckled slightly, and she fell forward. Daniel rushed to catch her, but she pushed him away quickly. "Don't touch." "Me," she said with a growl, her cheeks turning red. "I'm fine," she added, but her voice was weak. He saw the damage on her armor. Sparks and cracks ran across her suit. Some kind of black fluid leaked from her side. "You're hurt," he said gently. She sat down against a rock, breathing heavily. "I need to repair my armor before nightfall," she said. "But first, I need you to turn around." Daniel blinked, confused. "Why?" She narrowed her eyes and said in a firm voice, "No peeking, human." He turned around slowly. Still holding his weapon, he could hear strange hissing sounds behind him. Metal shifting, tools clicking, her armor opening piece by piece. His ears caught a soft gasp of pain, then a quiet curse in her alien language. He wanted to ask if she was okay, but he stayed silent. The last thing he needed was to make her angry again. But then, she gave a loud cry. He turned out of instinct. Her eyes widened as she covered her chest quickly with a panel of armor. "I said don't look," she shouted, her cheeks burning red, but Daniel wasn't staring at her body. He was staring at the glowing cube embedded inside her chest. It wasn't part of her body, or maybe it was. It pulsed with light and energy like a living heart. "What is that?" he asked, his voice soft with awe. She looked away, covering it quickly with armor. "None of your business," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "But that doesn't look normal," Daniel said. "Are you even a normal soldier?" She didn't answer, just pulled the armor shut with a hiss. Then she leaned her head back against the rock, closing her eyes. "You weren't supposed to see that," she whispered. Silence followed for several minutes. Daniel didn't move, didn't speak. He knew something strange was happening here. This wasn't just a crash. And she wasn't just a soldier. The cube, her strange armor, her reaction to his presence, everything told him this mission was more than it seemed. When she finally opened her eyes again, they looked softer, less angry. "You're not like the others," she said quietly. "You didn't try to shoot me or run away." "Didn't seem like the smart thing to do," he said with a small smile. She gave a tiny laugh. The first time he saw her relax, then she said, "You may stay nearby, but still." "No peeking," Daniel nodded, then sat on a rock a few steps away. As the twin moons rose higher, the wind grew colder. He kept one eye on the hills, one ear on her breathing. Something told him this night would not be quiet, and that this alien girl with her secrets and her glowing cube was not done surprising him, not at all. The night was cold and quiet, but Daniel couldn't sleep. He sat with his arms around his knees, eyes glancing toward the alien girl beside the fire. She had wrapped herself in a thin emergency blanket, But her armor still sparked now and then. She looked strong, but something about her seemed tired, not just her body, but her eyes, like she had been running from something for a long time. He handed her a small metal can of heat gel, one of the few supplies he had. She took it silently, their fingers barely touching. Her cheeks turned red again, and she looked away quickly. Why was she always blushing when he got close? The fire crackled softly, but suddenly she looked up with sharp eyes. "I need to fix my internal circuits," she said, voice serious. "Some of them are connected to my skin plates." Daniel nodded slowly, unsure what that meant. Then she said again, this time more firmly, "You need to turn around, human, no peeking." He raised his hands and turned his back to her. Okay, I won't look," he said, trying not to sound nervous. Behind him, he heard metal clicking, something like liquid pouring. Then soft grunts of pain. He swallowed and stared at the dark trees instead. But then she gasped, loud and sharp. Without thinking, he turned around. She was sitting there, armor opened, parts of her body glowing with soft blue lines. Her hand covered her chest, her eyes wide with shock. "I told you not to look," she said angrily, but her voice cracked at the end. Daniel didn't stare. He looked down quickly. "I just heard you in pain. I'm sorry," he said, his face red. She stared at him, breathing hard, then slowly lowered her head. "It's not your fault," she said after a pause. Her voice was quieter now, almost soft. "I've been hiding this for too long," she whispered. She opened her hand slightly, and again he saw it, that cube glowing inside her. Small wires ran from it into her ribs, into her arms, like it was part of her. "It's not a weapon," she said, as if reading his mind. "It's something ancient, something they put inside me." Daniel's eyes stayed gentle. "Why?" he asked. She looked at him, her purple eyes filled with something heavy. "I don't know," she answered. "I was trained to fight, to kill, but this thing, it speaks to me." Daniel didn't know what to say. He wasn't trained for this kind of mission. But somehow, sitting here with her, it didn't feel like a mission anymore. It felt like something bigger, something personal. She closed her armor slowly, clicking the plates back into place. Then she leaned forward and poked the fire with a stick. "You still didn't peek," she said without looking at him. He smiled. "Just a little, not really." Suddenly a loud beep came from her broken device. She grabbed it fast and turned it off. But Daniel saw a flash of red letters before it disappeared. "What was that?" he asked. "Nothing," she said too quickly. "You're a terrible liar," he replied. She stood up and walked to the edge of the small camp, her back to him. "I wasn't supposed to survive the crash," she said slowly. "I think someone wants the cube destroyed, and me along with it." Daniel stood too, stepping closer. "Your own people?" he asked. She nodded just once. "I was useful until I became dangerous." The firelight flickered between them. The space between felt both close and wide. Then she turned around and gave him a strange smile. "You're not going to run, are you?" He shook his head. "Not unless you chase me," he joked. She laughed, really laughed this time, and it sounded like music, soft and clear, like something forgotten coming back to life. That night, under the alien stars, Daniel didn't sleep. Again, he stayed awake, watching the trees, the fire, and the girl who was part machine, part mystery. Something told him this was only the beginning, and that the cube in her chest was going to change everything, maybe even him. The stars above were still bright, but something felt wrong. Daniel sat near the fire, half asleep, when he heard a soft noise behind him. He turned slowly and saw her kneeling beside the communicator she had kept hidden. The alien mercenary was trying to fix it, her fingers moving fast over broken wires and blinking lights. But she didn't notice him watching, not until the screen lit up with a red warning. Her eyes locked on the message, her face turned pale. Then she shut the device quickly and looked up. Daniel had already seen enough. "Target located. Kill on sight," he said quietly. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stood and looked into the trees, her jaw clenched. That message was sent before I even woke up, she finally said. They were never coming to rescue me. Daniel took a slow step forward. Your own people, they want you dead? She nodded, her voice low. I disobeyed orders. I asked too many questions, and then they put the cube inside me. Daniel's chest tightened. They used you, he said. She gave a bitter laugh. I was their perfect weapon until I started thinking for myself. For a moment, neither of them spoke, only the wind moved, brushing through the grass like whispers. Daniel stepped closer, lowering his voice. Then you're not just some soldier, are you? She turned to face him, the firelight dancing in her eyes. I was a hunter, trained since childhood. I completed missions no one else could. She paused, her voice shaking. But the last mission, it wasn't right. Daniel watched her, listening carefully. They sent me to a moon village. She continued. They said the people there were hiding rebels, but it was a lie. She looked down at her hands, as if seeing blood on them. I followed orders, and they made me a killer. He didn't speak, didn't judge. She looked up at him again, her voice sharper now. When I found the truth, I tried to escape, but the cube, it bonded to me. They said it was an honor, but I think they wanted to bury it with me. Daniel felt something heavy in his chest. She wasn't just running, she was surviving, and now he was part of it. She walked away from the fire and sat on a rock, staring up at the stars. I thought being strong meant obeying without question, she said. But now, I think strength is choosing your own path. Daniel sat beside her, careful not to sit too close. You've got a second chance now, he said, her lips curved into a small smile. So do you, human. They sat in silence for a while, both lost in thought. But suddenly, her ears twitched. She stood quickly and drew her blade, scanning the shadows. What is it? Daniel asked, gripping his small weapon. She pointed to the sky. Drone, she whispered. He looked up and saw a small red light moving slowly in the dark. It's scanning, she said. They're getting close. Without warning, she grabbed his arm. We have to move. Daniel didn't argue. He followed her into the trees, their boots silent on the dry ground. The fire died behind them, and only darkness remained. As they moved deeper into the forest, Daniel glanced at her face. It was calm, focused, but there was fear in her eyes, not for herself, but for him. They stopped near a cliff, and she looked down at a narrow cave. We'll hide there, she said. He slid down first. Catching his balance on a stone, she followed, but as she landed, a piece of her armor broke off. She cursed it under her breath and kicked it aside. Daniel reached out to help, but she waved him off. I'm fine, she said, though her breath was heavy. Inside the cave, the air was damp and cold, but it was quiet, and for now, safe. She sat down, pulling what was left of her armor around her. Daniel looked at her glowing side, where the cube's light still flickered softly. We'll get through this, he said. She looked at him, eyes tired but warm. If they come, she said softly. Promise me something, he nodded. Don't try to be a hero, Daniel smiled sadly. No promises, she laughed. Leaning back against the cave wall, for the first time, she looked like she wasn't alone. For the first time, she looked like she believed someone might fight for her, even if it meant everything would change. The room smelled of smoke and blood. Metal sparks floated through the air like fireflies. Ray wiped sweat from his forehead with the back of his arm, his chest rising fast. Zarin stood next to him, her blade glowing faintly, her skin marked with small burns. They had fought off 3 drones barely. Ray had hit one with a broken pipe. Zarin took down the rest. Now the room was quiet again, but the silence felt heavier than before. They sat near the wall, breathing hard. Zarin leaned back and let her head rest against a crate, her eyes closing for a moment. Ray looked at her, not sure what to say. He finally broke the silence. You okay? She gave a weak nod. Just tired. He pulled out a small food ration from his bag and handed it to her. Not human food, she said without opening her eyes. Too sweet. He smiled and broke it in half. Then you'll love this. She opened one eye, then took the piece, sniffed it, and tasted it slowly. Her eyes widened, and she coughed lightly. Ray laughed. Told you. She gave him a small smile, then leaned her head on the wall again. For a while, they didn't talk, just listened to the quiet humming of damaged wires above. Then she spoke, her voice low. I don't remember the last time I sat like this, with someone. Ray turned to her. What do you mean? I was trained to work alone, she said. Even when I had teammates, it never felt like this. He nodded. Sometimes it's not the fight that breaks you, it's the loneliness. She looked at him, studying his face as if she didn't expect those words. You've been through things too, she said, more as a fact than a question. He gave a slow nod. War took a lot from me. Even when I wasn't a soldier. Zarin lowered her gaze, as if thinking deeply. Outside the room, something shifted, but it didn't come closer. Ray pulled his jacket tighter and scooted closer to the small heating unit. Zarin moved next to him without saying a word, close enough that their shoulders touched. Her body was warm, and though her armor was mostly off now, the thin layer she wore still carried the scent of burned circuits and something strangely sweet. He didn't move away, and neither did she. The fire made her silver eyes glow softly, like moonlight over water. After a moment, she turned her face toward him and spoke in a quiet voice. There's something inside me. Ray's breath caught slightly. What do you mean? She pulled back one sleeve to reveal her forearm, where the skin opened slightly with a hiss, revealing a small glowing cube. Ray leaned in, eyes wide. This is not tech from my world, she said. Someone placed it in me during a mission. They didn't tell me, didn't ask. What does it do? He asked. I don't know, she said, but others are willing to kill for it. Ray stared at the glowing cube, its light slowly pulsing like a heartbeat. Maybe that's why they wanted me close to you, he said. Maybe they thought I could get it out. Zarin gave him a dry laugh. If that was their plan, they picked the wrong man. Ray chuckled. Yeah, I can barely fix my own ship. They laughed softly, and the tension between them melted just a little. Zarin looked at the cube again, then carefully closed the panel on her arm. It's part of me now, she said, and I don't know what will happen if it's removed. Ray met her eyes and said gently, then we protect it together. She blinked, not expecting that. You're strange, human, she whispered. Most would have tried to cut it out by now. I don't hurt people who trust me, he said. And you? Trust me now, don't you? Zarin didn't answer right away, but her eyes softened and she gave a small nod. She leaned her head on his shoulder without a word. Ray didn't move, just sat still as her warmth spread through his side. For a moment, there was peace in the room, even with danger still outside. Then the lights flickered twice, followed by a low mechanical hum. Zarin sat up fast, eyes sharp again. They're moving toward the transport station, she said. If we want to escape, we have to go now. Ray stood, grabbing what little gear they had, as they prepared to leave. Zarin looked at him one more time. If I don't make it, she said softly. Don't let them take it. Ray looked at her firmly. We're both getting out. Don't say goodbye yet. She smiled again, but this time it was real. And for the first time since they met, she believed him. A red light blinked through the trees. Ray woke first, eyes snapping open as the pale glow washed over the rocks near the cave. Zarin was already on her feet, silent, her hand gripping the hilt of her blade. She didn't speak, only nodded once. Ray followed her out of the cave, crouching low as they moved under thick branches. The light belonged to a seeker drone, but not just any kind. This one was larger, slower, scanning in wide circles. It wasn't looking for movement. It was looking for her heat signature. Zarin whispered, They brought trackers from my world. That means they're close, human. Ray narrowed his eyes. How close? She didn't answer, but her fingers tightened around his wrist as she pulled him behind a fallen tree. That's when he heard it, metal boots on leaves. Not machines, not drone soldiers, real ones. He peeked between two branches and saw them. 3 figures, tall and armored in dark plating with green lights on their helmets. They didn't speak as they moved, only scanned everything, their rifles humming quietly. Zarin pressed her back to the tree and mouthed something he couldn't understand. A code, maybe, from her world. Then she turned to him and said softly, "I know that unit. They're called Silence." Ray gave her a confused look. "Why that name?" "Because you don't hear them coming, and no one who sees them lives," she replied. Her voice didn't shake, but Ray saw the fear in her eyes. Real fear, not the kind she showed in battle. These weren't just enemies, they were ghosts. From her past, Ray held his breath as one of the soldiers passed just 2 meters away. He gripped a rock, ready to throw it if he had to. But then, Zarin moved, slow and smooth like a shadow. She slipped around behind one of the soldiers, silent as the wind, with one strike. Her blade hummed and pierced through his armor at the neck. No scream, just a thud. The other 2 turned fast, but by then Ray had jumped up too. He tackled one into a tree, knocking the rifle from its hands. The third raised its gun, but Zarin was faster. She threw a dagger straight into the visor, shattering it with a spark. When it was over, all 3 bodies lay still. Ray was shaking, his chest rising fast. "I thought you said not to be a hero," he said between breaths. Zarin looked at him, then smirked. "I also said you'd have to keep up," he grinned, then winced as he felt blood on his shoulder. Zarin walked over and touched the wound. Gently. "It's shallow," she said. "But we can't stay here." Ray nodded. "There'll be more, right?" "Always," she replied. They took what gear they could carry, including a strange energy pack from the drone. Zarin studied it for a moment, then whispered, "This was tracking me using the cube's signal." Ray looked at the glowing crystal. "In his pocket, so we can't keep it with us?" "No," she said, "but maybe we can turn it against them by evening." They reached a burnt clearing with pieces of an old ship scattered around. Ray stared at the wreckage. "Is this from your world?" Zarin knelt beside a broken engine core, brushing away ash. "My old squad's transport," she said. "This was the last place I saw them alive." She picked up a half-melted insignia and held it in her hand. Ray could tell it meant something. Even if she didn't say it, he placed a hand on her shoulder, and she didn't push it away. Instead, she whispered, "They trusted me, and I led them to death. You were following orders." Ray said gently, "Exactly," she replied. "And that's what broke me." Suddenly, her eyes widened, and she stood up fast. "The wreck still has power," she said. "We can overload the core and make it look like a crash beacon." Ray raised an eyebrow. "To draw them here?" She nodded. "Then we ambush them, together," he smiled. "That's your idea of a good date?" She rolled her eyes but didn't hide her grin. "You're strange, human," she said. "But maybe that's why I'm still alive." They worked quickly, rewiring the energy cells, hiding traps, and placing old heat emitters around the site. By the time the stars returned, the field looked like a ship crash again, but this time, it had teeth. Zarin checked her blade one last time, then turned to Ray. "Once this starts, there's no running," Ray nodded. "Wasn't planning." She stared at him for a long moment, then took a step closer. Her voice was quiet, unsure. "If we survive this, I want to show you my world." Ray blinked, surprised, then smiled. "And if we don't?" Zarin leaned close, her forehead gently touching his. Then this was enough. Neither of them spoke after that, because far in the dark, red lights were blinking again, and this time they were coming fast. The ground shook softly, just enough for Ray to feel it through his boots. Zarin crouched behind a pile of broken metal, her blade ready, her breathing calm but focused. Above them, red dots glowed brighter with every second. They had taken the bait. Ray checked the blaster he took from one of the fallen soldiers. It wasn't made for human hands, but he made it work anyway. Beside him, Zarin whispered something in her language, a short phrase, maybe a prayer. Ray didn't ask, he just nodded. Then the first soldier stepped into the trap zone. Heavy armor, bigger than the last one's, visor glowing blue. He scanned the crash site carefully, lifting a scanner and checking for life signs. The moment his foot crossed the heat sensor, everything changed. A flash of light burst from the wreckage. Blinding and loud, the trap exploded, sending sharp metal and fire through the air. Before the soldier could scream, Zarin was already moving. She jumped from cover, spinning through the smoke, her blade cutting through armor like paper. Ray fired twice at another figure entering from the north. One blast hit the arm. The other hit center mass. The target fell backward, crashing through burnt branches. More soldiers came, 6 this time. Surrounding them fast, Zarin kicked a fallen crate toward Ray and shouted, "Behind it now." They ducked together as energy blasts tore through the air above. Sparks and dirt rained down. Ray shouted over the noise, "We're outnumbered." Zarin replied, calm as ever, but not outmatched. She activated something on her wrist, and the cube in her chest glowed brighter. The nearest soldier hesitated, then screamed as his weapon short-circuited and exploded in his hands. Ray's eyes widened. "You can control their tech?" Zarin didn't look at him, just said, "Now I can," one by one. Their enemies fell, some from the traps, some from her blade, and some from her growing power. But it wasn't easy. Ray took a hit to the leg, fell behind a rock, pain shooting through him like lightning. Zarin ran to him, her armor cracked and bleeding. She dropped to her knees, hands trembling as she checked his wound. "It's bad," he said, his voice tight. She shook her head. "No, you're not dying here." He tried to smile. "You said no hero stuff." "I lied," she whispered, her voice shaking for the first time. She tore a strip from her suit and wrapped his leg. Then she looked up and saw the last soldier aiming from a ridge. Without thinking, she leapt forward and threw her blade straight into the enemy's chest. The body fell back, silent. Smoke drifted over the field. The fight was over. Zarin returned to Ray. Dropping beside him, blood ran down her cheek, but her eyes only focused on him. "You're okay," she said, more to herself than to him. He looked at her and laughed once. "Weak but real. You saved me. You saved me first," she replied. They sat there, broken and tired, the world around them quiet again. Zarin pulled out the cube, now pulsing like a heartbeat. She stared at it for a long time, then handed it to Ray. "You keep it now." He frowned. "Why me?" "Because I trust you more than I trust myself," she said. He held the cube carefully, feeling its warmth in his hands. It didn't feel dangerous anymore. It felt alive. Zarin leaned her head on his shoulder, closing her eyes. "You fought beside me," she whispered. "Not because you had to, but because you wanted to." Ray didn't answer right away. He just placed his hand over hers and held it. The wind blew gently now, as if even the planet was finally resting. Their bond was no longer silent. It was real and strong. And somewhere deep inside the cube, something awakened. A signal, waiting to be heard. But that would come later. For now, all that mattered was this moment. 2 survivors sitting in the ruins. Not as strangers, not as enemies, but as something more. The smoke had cleared, but the sky was still gray. Rain fell slowly, not heavy, just soft enough to wash the blood from broken stones. Zarin stood at the edge of the battlefield, her face turned upward. Her armor was gone, her blade lost, and yet she looked more whole than ever before. Ray limped toward her, the cube still in his hand, glowing a soft blue. He wore a makeshift wrap over his injured leg, each step slow but steady. When she heard him, she turned around and smiled. "You made it," she whispered. "You sound surprised," he said, stopping beside her. "I've lost too many," she replied. "I was afraid I'd lose you too." Ray looked around the field where broken machines and armored bodies still lay. "It's over, isn't it?" Zarin nodded slowly. For now. They walked together to the place where the signal beacon stood, an old tower they had repaired using parts from the wreck. Ray placed the cube inside the chamber at the top. It clicked softly and began to sending out waves of light. Across the stars, the signal would travel, carrying her memories, her truth, everything they fought for. Zarin watched with a quiet heart. "They'll come," she said. "Not to fight, but maybe to listen." "And if they don't?" Ray asked. "Then we make them," she replied with a calm fierceness in her voice. Rain slid down her cheek, hiding the tears she wouldn't admit. Ray reached out and gently took her hand. She didn't pull away, not this time. Instead, she looked at him like he was the only steady thing left in the galaxy. "I never thought a human would be the one to save me," she said softly. "And I never thought an alien would be the reason I stopped running," he answered. She laughed. Lightly, a sound so rare it made the moment feel unreal. "Where do we go now?" She asked. "Wherever you want," he said. "I'm not going without you." She stepped closer, close enough that he could feel the warmth of her breath. Her silver eyes searched his face. "Serious now. You saw me broken, weak, angry, and lost," she whispered. "And I still chose to stay," he said, not breaking eye contact. Zarin leaned forward, her forehead resting gently against his. "I think I'm done hiding," she said. "No more armor, no more silence." Lightning flashed in the sky behind them, but neither moved. For the first time there was no need for words. Whatever strange bond had formed between them in the cold, in the fire, in the battle, it was real now. Something deeper than duty, something stronger than fear. When the shuttle finally arrived the next day, it found two figures waiting, a human and an alien, standing side by side, no longer strangers, no longer enemies. Zarin carried nothing but her broken suit and her name. Ray carried the cube and her trust. Together, they boarded the ship without looking back. They had no home to return to, but they had each other. And in this strange galaxy full of war, lies, and forgotten stars, that was more than enough. She sat beside him as the ship took off, her fingers brushing against his, and just before the stars swallowed them again, she leaned close and whispered with a soft blush, "No peeking, human." And this time he smiled and whispered back, "Not unless you ask." The ship rose into the sky, quiet, smooth, and full of something new, hope.